Hello, everybody. Are we on? Are we on? It feels,
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the live reading of the Sexy Times with Wang Xian tag list.
oh my gosh. Well, it feels absolutely amazing to be doing this panel just because we have come such a long way for this fandom. It has. It has. Okay. So I guess we'll start with a little self intro. I'm Suika, the translator for Heaven Official's Blessing and Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation.
Hi, I'm Pengie. I do the editing on both of those things.
All right, so we'll start with a little history of how things started, I guess, going 5 years. That includes the plague. Yeah. And what the working process is now. And hopefully, this will answer most of the questions that we received. And if time allows, by all means, send us additional questions through the chat. So I guess we'll start with the history. And so in 2018, my friends introduced me to MDZS via the Donghua, and well, obviously the it was so good. It was so good that I quickly finished it, and I had to know what happened after season one. So I went and plowed through the novel, and so prior to this, most of the media I consumed were manga and anime. I knew Chinese web novels were a thing. My sister reads often online, but it wasn't something I personally sought. And then after I finished the novel, I wanted more. And most of my friends who dragged me down this rabbit hole didn't actually read Chinese, and the fan translation wasn't complete. So I was all alone. And so one of them dropped Heaven on my lap and was like, well, here's this one. It's written by the same author. And then that was it. That was the end. And and then yeah, it consumed me. I devoured the book, and then I was again alone because nobody else read it. Right. So I'm like,
Yes.
well, I need
That was it.
everybody
That was in the
to
very,
read it.
very early days of Danmei fandom.
Yeah.
Um, I believe like Danmei wasn't unknown at the West. I recall many friends being into Guardian way back in the day, but
Hmm.
it
It
was
wasn't anything
definitely
that caught on.
it was definitely MXTX that really kicked off the trend over here. And I got into Danmei through Suika's TGCF translation because
Whoop, whoop.
my Twitter just started getting fucking spammed with a bunch of dudes being gay, and
What more do you need to
yeah,
come into the fandom?
and I was baffled, and I knew it's just like, okay, I apparently have one of these 3 series to pick from. Which one do I pick first? I guess this one, and I read so my first of the 3 MXTX was TGCF excuse me, TGCF actually, which means that I'm special and not like other girls.
Ah, ah.
So I got in while it was still going. I believe that you were in I think you might have just finished book 2 at that point.
Oh,
Um,
okay. So
yeah.
fairly, yeah. So we were already sort of into it.
Yeah, and we didn't know each other beforehand, but we have a lot of mutual friends,
Ye-
and through those mutual friends, I learned that you were longing for an editor.
Yes.
Yes, at which point I approached you and you were just like, "Sure."
Yep. Yes, please.
No further questions. Um,
Anyone who wants to edit, please help me.
um,
Yes.
but
But yeah.
yeah, and after TGCF, um, through then I got into the Donghua. Next, I went into the Donghua for MDZS. Um, read the fan TL for that next. And then it's just that's when all of the adaptations started to go ham, so I can't really tell you which one was next in particular. I believe I did read Scum Villain next after that, but
2019 was the golden age for Danmei fandom. I think MDZS was getting adaptations for everything. And that was also injecting a lot of fresh blood
Scum
into the
Villain
Danmei
got
fandom.
an adaptation.
I can't even say half, 1.5, because that one didn't even start off. Unfortunate. But
you have a
Scum
season.
Villain is still very good. It's very deserving of more
Please
adaptations.
understand that Lily, the translator for Scum Villain, is probably in the chat because she at least told us she would be. So we're doing this with love. We're not insulting eldest brother.
But yeah,
it's also a bestseller.
yeah, well deserved.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, MXTX's novels are also deserving of their recognition.
Yes. Out of all of, not to wildly generalize, but I believe that out of any Danmei work, I believe MXTX is probably the most accessible for a Western audience that is not really familiar with the tropes.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
but don't need a doctorate in Buddhist studies like with Nanchan.
Yeah. No, it's true. Nanchan's also a hefty work. But yeah, so onto the journey of how all of the MXTXs got published. So starting at the very beginning of Pengie and my journey, I read Tuha. Yes, I say Tuha in English.
Tuha.
Tuha. In 2019, early 2019. I think it was like January, and then I dragged Rin into it. So that's how the Tuha fan translation project started. And then after a few months, there was a publisher who wanted to buy the English license for Tuha from JJ. But for various reasons, that didn't pan out. And so this prompted.
That's some ancient tea for you there.
That is some very ancient drama. I mean, yeah, we're not going to get into that. But this prompted.
Post in the chat if you want us to get into that.
No,
don't actually do that, please.
I'm not gonna name names. I don't know anybody. I don't know anything. Okay. So anyway, this prompted.
We'll save that for when I become a drama VTuber.
Nah. I'll tip you for it. But yeah, I wanted to hunt down a publisher for Heaven because I'm like, well, if MXTS is going to be published, I hope it's one that we can all, trust. And there's more experience in the publisher, more based in North America with proper marketing and all that jazz. So Pengie and I sent multiple emails to a number of houses. I sent emails to the Chinese ones, and Pengie sourced and sent emails to English ones, and then one day we got a response from Seven Seas.
And it was quite a quick response as far as the publishing timetables go, so they definitely were interested.
Well, it's safe to say we were ecstatic.
Yes.
I was literally screaming silently since I was working at the time, but I was screaming and I was giggly for weeks while the talks were happening. And then when they told us they were doing all 3 MXTX titles, not just Heaven, I obviously ugly cried silently in the shop. No. So that was how it came to be.
Yeah, I was just that Plankton from SpongeBob. It's just like, I don't know, but I didn't think I would get this far.
Yeah, we both thought it was just going to be a pipe dream In
Mhm.
fact, I looked into publishing it myself, and then one of the publishing agents for JJ, she very kindly did not laugh me out of the house, but when she gave me a rough figure of how much it would cost just to get Heaven, I very kindly let myself out of the house. And to be very honest, my emails to the publishers were essentially in very professional language. I said, I'm too poor for this. Please help.
I
And
will I
yes,
will say that like this
yes.
is something that you need a big publisher to get to grab. They're not dinky little works that have never seen the light of a donghua or live action. Like
Mm.
JJ knows what they're worth.
I mean, MXTX was getting so many adaptations and in so many different languages at that point that, yeah, they
I
know
see
good
someone
stuff.
in the chat asking how much it was, and I'm not sure if we can share that information, but it was a lot.
Um, it's more than my annual salary by 3 times.
Maybe more.
Maybe more. You're right. I think too highly of my annual salary.
Mm. And I also see someone in the chat stating other publishers be mad for not accepting our emails, and they be mad. They definitely be mad.
I
Like
mean,
MXT, the success of these novels, as you can expect from books that go on the bestseller list literally every time that they come out, like their success did not go unnoticed by pretty much any publisher across the world, but in part in particular publishers in North America. So you can expect that there will be other licenses getting picked up by not just Seven Seas, but other publishers as well.
super excited. Very exciting for Danmei to become popular.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's, I mean, essentially it is BL, and obviously queer media deserves a lot of international attention for various reasons, political and non-political, right? Because, I mean, just want some free media that we can consume without any guilt or any restrictions, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the more there is, the
Just
more
want
visible they are.
bitch just want to read about a sword going up a dude's ass.
Ah! A heavenly pillar, a sky pillar, blasted at
That
20
yeah,
centimeters.
God.
But yes, I think we veered off
Hats
topic.
off to whoever on Twitter actually did the math to measure how long his dick is. Because I definitely remember that thread.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our current process working on the translations. I translate the end. Um, I believe one of the questions was if I have any philosophies going into translation. And essentially, I did not go to school for translation, and I first translated purely out of passion for Heaven Official's Blessings. And my my only thought going into it was I need my friends to suffer exactly I have suffered. You know, they have to understand the text the way I did in Chinese for that full effect. So, and also the reaction threads, their reaction, everyone's reading reactions has definitely motivated me throughout just because it's incredibly validating, right? It's like, ah, yes, I felt that. It's that meme with the old fan and new fan. You guys know what I'm
You're the
talking about.
one who decided to release the sword stabbing scene on Hua Cheng's birthday.
Oh, it was so good. It's pure coincidence, It was so good.
And
Wait, no, that one
and
wasn't a coincidence.
and for the record, she tried to ask Seven Seas if we could publish the volume that's going to include that, on Hua Cheng's birthday again, which
Allah.
they declined because they can't guarantee that we can do that.
I'll ask again in good faith. But
I'm going to attack you with a bat.
but yes. But yeah, I translate, and then Pengie edits my translation for the very first rough draft, and Pengie can,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
The process is different for TGCF versus MDZS because one has our existing fan translation and the other is from scratch. TGCF, what I do is I go in. We were the ones who decided where the volume splits happen. Like the publisher did give us, guidance on like this volume looks a little bit long, like some of the chapters need to be redistributed to another one, just because there is a limit to how big a volume can get before the printers literally cannot handle it, and the book will not be able to hold itself together and it will fall apart. So there is a limit on how big these books can be, and that's why they are split into the volumes, the number of volumes that they are. So Suika and I were the ones who decided where the volume splits happen. And so we go in whenever a new volume comes up. For TGCF, I go through and do just a really hard edit first. And then Suika goes in and reviews it. And this step is necessary despite it already being translated, because MXTX herself has made updates to TGCF that are not reflected in the version that was on JJ. It's in the Pinsin edition for those of you who are able to read Chinese. That is the edition that we are referencing. But Suika does need to review that master copy that was given to us against the fan translation from, whenever you grab the text from JJ, and make sure that everything is consistent with her new edits. Like, she will sometimes change, like, probably the biggest scene that was changed was in our volume 2. Well, I can't. I remember there was a big one in that one. I'm not a great public speaker. I'm sorry.
No, neither of us are. We're bookworms. We're not.
Yes.
Talking people.
It was right before they barged into Qirong's neat lair. That whole confrontation was. She made a lot of changes to it, but even outside of that, like, she'll sometimes change the order of paragraphs, add lines. Like, I think Function and Muqing, they will sometimes get new lines to, add to their role as peanut gallery.
How dare you?
Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong.
They're more than peanuts.
They're a whole jar of mixed nuts. But yeah, that's, before I get even further off topic, that's what Suika needs to review the TGCF translation for. And after she does that, I do another edit. And then after that's done and we, review it together and agree on everything, that gets sent off to the house editor for 7Cs. That is assigned to us for TGCF in particular. And that house editor makes sure that it adheres to, like, formatting stuff for that's needed for the printer. Make sure that we didn't accidentally miss any of Suika's Canadianisms, because these are
Killing all of my U's.
US. We use US spelling grammar.
It drives me nuts.
My sincerest apologies.
And now it drives me nuts that I automatically use American spelling when I write. I'm losing my Canadian. I hate it. Yeah.
Take those U's out of your mouth, you dirty
Ah,
Canadian.
no. Cancellation uses double L, not one. Okay. But
And yeah,
otherwise,
that's and once the house editor is done with their run on TGCF, they will send it back to us for us to review. Like, it's not just they get the final say; we get to review what they do, and then we discuss it with them. And then after that, that's when it goes into the dark depths of like getting it really like, you know, they get it sent to the design team to make sure that the pages look all nice. They get it sent to, the print team for a final review, all that kind of good stuff. For MDZS, since that is a new translation, Suika obviously has first run on that, and then once she's done, I will go in and review it, clean up sentence structure, discuss things, and especially with MDZS, like, we will sometimes need to make judgment calls on, like, do we need a new footnote for this? Do we need to, localize this term versus transliterate it? Because most of those decisions were already made for TGCF back when the fan translation first came out. So those are discussions that we need to actually have on MDZS. So I don't think one really takes longer than the other, though. Like, just the unique challenges of
they're both different.
Unique challenges of cleaning up the fan translation versus the unique challenges of making a new translation. I think they mostly even out as far as time goes.
Yeah. I mean, I'll interject here that proper English grammar sucks. And
are you just saying that? Are you just saying that because we smack those U's out of your hands?
There has been, there were more at the very beginning when we first started. There were a lot of clashes, fights, I guess. Not really fights. We're nice after the fights between Pengie and I, as well as the in-house editors, to really work out what works for everybody, and also really trying to figure out how to best deliver the effects, get the point across, and keep it within the confines of proper grammar. I've definitely fought with the editors a lot on punctuation. Punctuation.
It's just like the only thing that the editors really ever, the only lengthy discussions we ever have with the editors is mostly on grammar rules. Like, that, like, they don't argue with us on translations or anything like that because they trust us to, they trust in our experience as translator/editor. So
they generally try not to touch the meaning. They just try to make sure that it reads properly in English, that everything follows conventions, and when you read it, it's a proper English book.
And they will, they are, some of them are familiar with Danmei. Like, there are Danmei fans on the house editing team. I will not say any more specifics, but a lot of them are very much outsiders to Danmei. So they serve as good test subjects to be like,
read this for the first time.
These books, these books are for fans, but they don't want to exclude new readers, because why shouldn't new readers who aren't already familiar with Danmei experience these. So having editors on staff who aren't familiar with Danmei, who can say, I don't understand what this term means. Can you explain it? Or what is, you know, what is a sword glare and how does it differ from a sword aura? um, Stuff like that. So it's kind of good to have an outsider perspective to bring you back down to earth, being like, oh yeah, I've read too many novels and just understand what that means and assumed everyone else did. So those are kind of the things that the editors are there for. They're not there to tear anything out of our hands. I also see that somebody asked about the illustrations in the chat. I'm trying not to get distracted with chat questions because I know it's just going to because it's just going to
No.
derail. But
Yeah.
Suika and I largely decide what gets illustrated. We make just a big list of everything that we think would make good illustrations in TGC. This is for TGCF in particular, by the way. MDZS obviously that has lovely
Marina's
pre-existing,
gorgeous.
yes,
Gorgeous
lovely
illustration.
illustrations from Marina and lovely colors from Jin. We get to kind of pick we have input on the topic of the covers for MDZS, but those are more of a group decision because they also need to be, big and eye-catching and actually work as covers.
And Jen is also a huge MDCS fan, so
Yes.
she has her own input on what she wants on the cover as well.
But for TGCF, Suika and I we submit a big list of illustrations. I put all of the Jinwoo scenes in every book on that list. Suika shakes her head at me. And then we send them to Zelda, and Zelda reads through them, and she picks usually between 10 to 12 to illustrate, whichever ones stand out to her. So illustrations are largely that decision is largely made by the three of us, me, Suika, and Zelda.
I think overall, like, the process feels a little convoluted, but at the same time, it's such a huge group project that we're constantly messaging each other at all hours of the day, running over questions and
Yeah, I have a completely
ironing
fucked
things
up
out.
sleep schedule, but that sleep schedule wasn't like.
Yeah, I would wake up
that's
at
just
7 in
that's
the
just
morning
me. That's just
to,
how I that's how I
yeah.
do. That's how I do. I email you at 4 a.m. and then go to bed.
Ah. Well, sometimes Pengie and the editors would go at it at 3 in the morning, and then I wake up at noon maybe and see this massive thing notification waiting for me. I'm like, oh my God, what happened now? But yeah, there's a lot of people working on the projects, and everyone contributes a piece to it. So ultimately, it's yeah. I think it's quite amazing how it's all wrestled together and whatnot. There were certainly, I mean, volume one for all three was certainly a journey just because it was three books at the same time,
They were all released
requiring
on
different
the same
tasks.
exact day, and that means that all three books had to share the same, like the design team was just
Going insane.
pedal to the metal.
I mean, we were also,
Yeah.
well, the in-house editors had to also make a lot of guideline decisions for the style, like what we gotta ping
It's
in.
gotten significantly easier because we've gotten all the kinks worked out. Like,
Yeah, but it's definitely a delicate balance between what to localize and what to use pinging for, because once again, ultimately, it's the delivery of the text to the target readership, which is North American, and which I believe one of the questions was we use a lot of North American slang, and ultimately it's because it's North American
Yeah,
publication.
it's a North American release. It's kind of unavoidable.
Yeah.
So,
And
flat war flashbacks to all the anime that give Osaka characters Texas accents.
but yeah, like the editors will let slip a couple of IOs in there for effect, but
Mhm,
ultimately the colloquial language will be localized.
mhm.
And same for the naming conventions. If we can, they want to keep it English, I think. I don't know.
That's kind of a case by case basis thing. I think
Yeah.
someone asked like, how do you decide what terms you transliterate and which terms you translate? I err on the side of transliteration. In it really depends. Like I think I have my notes on. I do have notes. I did write notes. Somebody give me an
Mm,
award for writing notes.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, the
but
naming thing is hard just
yeah,
because.
it's for proper names and places. Like generally in English, you if those come from another language, you leave them in that language, and if it's important, you footnote it. Like that is generally how things work with in English. That um, for example, I have the Donghua, the dub of TGCF, and they how they did the Zhu Yang versus Dick Yang thing.
That was brilliant, by the way.
It that
That
was
was some
it.
brilliant
Yeah,
wordplay in English.
yeah. Um, I would never like entertain the thought of trying to localize something like that in the book when I can just footnote it because you will lose meaning no matter what option you choose. And so if you can footnote it, why not? But I can see why the Donghua did that, especially in the dub, because like this isn't a fan sub where you can just stop dead and just throw a wall of text up that explains the whole joke. Like the the Donghua needs to keep up, and they need to make decisions like that where they have to localize it.
Yeah.
And that also happened with the Donghua translating Kamo to Millstone. Um, that one's not as funny as Dick Young though.
Mm, I mean, generally, I think what we were told for volume one, footnotes wise, was that if if it can embed into the actual text, then do that first. And
Yeah,
then if
we can sometimes wiggle a little explanation into the text.
yeah, and if
We did that with Kamo, and we also did that with Shaylan's mother. Like that she actually has a family name, but it was just did not work in its original position, so we just moved it elsewhere.
yeah, well, I mean, the first time cut sweep showed up in
Mhm.
MDCS's translation, obviously we can work that into the actual text instead of using a footnote. So that was what
Somebody
was
just
done.
asked a very dangerous question in chat, and that is who is best girl? I I don't want to get distracted right now, but your question will be answered in due time.
But yeah, so continuing the footnotes, if an explanation is going to be more a cultural one, if it's going to be long, then it will go to the
Yeah, that goes in the
glossary
glossary.
instead of in the footnotes. So the footnote is generally going to be very short, very quick, like under use it to understand the text and move on, basically. And I believe for the volume ones, we had to minimize it just because didn't know whether or not the Chinese characters would show up in print, so they didn't want to mess with that. So we're like, okay, we're gonna be careful, play it safe, and then
They've been very kind to us with the
yeah,
footnotes. Like
yeah, they have.
I think they mentioned that normally they don't do footnotes at all, but we were just like, but we want footnotes, and they were like, okay, you can have footnotes. So
I mean, there's so
it was
much
not yeah.
that I mean, I feel readers would be completely clueless
Oh,
if they
without the
didn't
footnotes and the
have.
glossary, these books would be
Yeah,
n- not very reader friendly to people who are not
yeah.
balls deep in Danmei.
Yeah, but personally, I do think like this whole experience, like the industry in general, coming into it completely new. Um, I mean, I do think there's a learning curve for everyone entering a new industry, previously trained or not. And yeah, and I do think that working working on the project has definitely taught me a lot on this side of the table, I guess, of how things work. And it's definitely helped me improve how I approach translation in general.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, all the exposure to the editing has definitely made me conform to some of their rigid ways. But
I've edited professionally in the past,
yeah,
but this is
but
high stakes is possibly not the correct term for it, but it's probably the biggest
yeah,
project I've ever been on.
yeah. But I mean, it's very stressful, but at the same time, like it's definitely an incredible experience at the same time. And not to mention that we love the books, we love MXTX, the author, and it's I think it's just incredibly gratifying
Hmm.
to see her works being published and recognized and loved internationally. And
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
very happy thing.
I also saw a question in chat asking
Mm,
why the publisher didn't choose to sell MXTX merch with the books. Um, it's not very common in North American releases, at the very least, to bundle merch with books that are sold at bookstores. Like, if you are in the U.S., you know, go to Barnes and Noble. Like, that's just not normally something that you see on the shelves. So it's not that they were against it. It's just something that they were just like, that's not really what is done in the States. We'll see how it goes. And if you saw their tweet from like a week or two ago, they are doing a special edition for Scum Villain in its last volume with some goodies. So
yeah.
they did do merch, and
And
fingers crossed that will be the same for MDZS and TGCF when their final volumes come as well.
I'm so excited. Ah, for all the good stuff. I'm really
Hmm.
excited for more authors to join
Hmm.
the pipeline. Yeah.
Meat Bun is eagerly and loudly with
The
us.
queen. She is such a queen. Yes.
We are
Uh,
very happy to have her.
okay. Um, do we have other questions? Yes, we have other questions. So, favorite scenes from MXTX works and hardest to translate. So, I mean, for MDZS, hands down, Madame Yu's bitch slap. Pun fully
Agree.
intended.
That
That
I was
was my
so
favorite
excited
scene.
to edit that, and it was
Ah, It was so
incredibly
good.
fun. Yes.
I loved her since the donghua, and going up to that part was just
That
absolute
circling
bliss.
back to the best girl question.
She is best girl, hands down. Yeah, I love her.
MDZS has a lot of best girls though, so that is a difficult question, but
I mean, MDCS is just pain and sadness, and then here comes Mad and You. It's like, bitch, slap all of that away. Yeah. I mean, we're not gonna talk about what comes after that, but yes, it was great. And hardest to translate for MDZS. I'm still pondering over Wei Wuxian's confession line, thinking about it. And for Heaven, I think there's a lot of favorite scenes, but generally the general book club vibe on Twitter made every scene incredibly enjoyable. So
MXTX is good. I've I've noticed this while editing, being so close to the to the source and editing, is that she's very, especially with TGCF, she's very, very good at like big scenes. Like you can tell that these are scenes that she really wanted to write. And you can kind of see that with her afterwards and some of her author's notes, where she's just like, oh yeah, this scene was in my head from the very start when I first started writing, and I'm so happy to be able to write it now. That comment was specifically in reference to the ending of book 2, with baby Wachung running after his future wife, screaming that he'll never forget him. That is definitely a favorite. That scene is definitely a favorite of mine too.
the high tension scenes are always so good. I love villains.
You and
I
you
love all the
freaking
villains.
swords.
So
I love one of them. I love a specific villain.
I love all the villains. Every time they speak, I I get very
So
happy.
you claim to love all of them equally, and then your little rat baby comes
Yeah.
in.
Rat Baby being Xue Yang and Jing
Yes,
Guangyao, the two bad friends. Not
the wor-
Chiron.
the
I do
worst,
not appreciate
the
Chiron as much
worsties,
as
the worsties. I think you
Chiron is
mean.
not even a villain. He tries.
He's definitely not a villain.
He
It
tries
was
very
just
hard
a
though.
prank, bro.
Ah, he is the jackass. But yeah. Otherwise, other hard things to translate, I would have to say the fact that Chinese can avoid using subjects when they so choose can get really annoying sometimes,
Yes.
especially when it's crucial to the plot. For example, the ringmaster being a lady, and for
Yeah.
most of the book, it was implied that she was a he, and it was
You
yeah,
mentioned that there was a lot of speculation when she was still releasing TGCF, when
yeah.
it was still in progress. There was speculation from the Chinese fandom that the ox was actually the Rainmaster,
That's the
and
way I
yeah.
understood it when I read the text too, until it got to when we got to the reveal, and I'm like, ah, wait.
Mm,
But otherwise, yeah, the pronoun was not used. It was completely um, removed or replaced by her title instead, like the Lord Ringmaster this, the Lord Ringmaster that. So
mhm.
working around that in English was rather tough just because English isn't as forgiving when it comes to not having a subject. You even have a
Yeah.
dummy it.
Yes, and the Seven Seas house editors have been extremely helpful with stuff like that. Like, and that also applies to stuff like the Windmasters gender switching. Like, all we need to do is tell the house editors, like, make sure to watch out for pronoun use in this, and this character, and they will remember it. They will look for it, and they will flag it if we miss anything. Because I believe that there were some instances where we missed a few.
Yeah.
There are definitely some instances where we accidentally referred to eyes versus I with Hua
Yes.
Chang.
Our previous manuscript edit, it was like, how many eyes do Huachin have in this entire
Oh my
segment?
god,
And then we
that
start counting
is a
eyes.
very common comment from
Ah,
the house editors. It's just like, what form is he in? How many eyes does he have right now?
ah. And then we discovered actually that the makeout scene in the temple, it didn't specify which form he was in.
Yes,
So
but MXTX approved the cover where he is pictured in big boy form. So we can safely assume that it's probably big boy form.
it better be big boy form. Ah, either way. But yeah, the lack of pronouns. It's a
Hmm.
mess. But, but yeah, we find ways to deal with it.
Hmm.
And then what other questions do we have? Do you have other questions? As a general Danmei question.
Uh, I've been getting distracted by answering random questions from chat.
Mm,
um, I think there was a question that was submitted about
and
favorite
that's
tropes in Danmei.
I mean, I feel like Dame isn't like a well, I don't want to say Dame is not its own thing, but at the same time it falls under the BL umbrella. It is romance fiction and whatnot. It falls under all different kinds of genres, besides the fact that it's homosexual and that it's Chinese in the character's background. But otherwise, tropes in general aren't that different, I feel, in fiction in general. So I prefer the hurt comfort. I also love villains getting what they deserve. Feels great. And
I think Danmei has a higher concentration of certain plots or plot elements than, for example, like there are certain tropes that are much more common in Danmei versus a Japanese work, for example. Um,
I feel like, I mean, authors of their own circle are obviously victims to what trends, right? So whatever trends in the past 5 years are going to be different than what trends in what was popular 10 years ago, right?
mhm,
Like obviously 10, 15, 20 years ago, the BL fiction then all the yaoi stuff are deemed much more problematic. They certainly have some interesting things, harder things,
boy.
and sometimes, a lot of times, perhaps uh, biologically inaccurate. But people learn, and
A whole pile of ABO books just waiting
trends
to get
change.
licensed.
I mean, you can see it in MXTX's progression too, from Scum Villain to Heaven Official's Blessings too.
Hmm.
And obviously, we're not going to touch too much on it, but the government, what's allowed to be written in
Hmm.
mainland China is also going to affect what gets written. I mean, the topic of how authors in China get around that is a whole other panel. But
Beep beep.
'cause there
It's
are other
the
sites.
car horn. It's a joke.
Well, it's very unfortunate that they can no longer access Archive of Our Own to drop the car
They
scene.
can
But
get through with proxies and VPNs, but that was not a that was a loss for
yeah, that was a huge loss.
yes.
I mean, there are other parking lots now, but obviously those are things that you'll have to dig for. But they do exist. What authors want to write, they will write. It's just that the mainstream websites are going to be restricted in the content that we want to see, unfortunately. I think at this point I read about 200 titles a year.
Yep. Somebody
Like,
in the
rah,
chat
rah, rah.
somebody in the chat actually requested Rex for lighter reads.
I have a
And
lot.
there is literally no one better to ask for recommendations than
I have such a long
Suika.
list, but at the same, it wouldn't be fair because most of them aren't translated. So it wouldn't be fair for me to drop titles on you guys and be like, "Oh, I want to read this," and then realize it's not accessible.
Do you know of any lighter reads that you are fairly sure have a fan translation? How about that?
I mean, besides the ones that are already known, circulating the fandom, right? Because there's the Adversary and Me. Was that one taken down? I think that one was taken down by BBTL. And there's the Have You Ever Met Such a Cold Author? I enjoyed that one. That's a cute, lighthearted read. I believe the fan translation for that one is complete. And if people want problematic recommendations, I mean,
Drop the PWP
have
list.
we reached 18 plus time yet? Is this 18 plus? Do we have to wait until 12?
I think this is an 18 plus con, so you can go ham.
I'm trying to...
Somebody specifically asked for Wump or Hurt Comfort recommendations.
I mean, how to... Oh, or sorry. Have You Ever Met Such a Cold Author is Hurt Comfort, which is why it's such a nice read. It's a nice fluff about a web novel author who is more of a recluse, who meets a fan who brings them out of his shell. And that's really nice. It's a really nice read. But yeah, if anything, I can probably tweet a list later, or you guys can DM me. I'll give you some recs, because I'm like trying to rack my brain on what these titles are in English, because their Chinese titles are popping up in my brain. I'm like, yes, this is this. I'm like, wait. What do people translate them as?
If you do make that list, I will make sure to post it into the Discord for everyone to reference afterwards.
I could probably, yeah, we could we could post it in the Discord. Nice list. Because I mean, besides the other big authors who are bigger on the plot, Priest is big on plot.
Yep. I was about to say if you want something light, no, absolutely full respect to Priest, but don't read Priest if you want something light.
I love Fei Tian's novels, but at the same time, you can't read them when you're busy or stressed because they also require too many brain cells.
Yes.
Yeah. But otherwise, Fei Tian's novels are incredibly enjoyable and incredibly fulfilling once you finish it, because you feel like you have gone through an entire journey and you have learned, you know. And
now, what have we learned from reading Meatbon's work?
Food porn. Food and porn together and separate.
Also,
But
it's not
also
good to
her.
fuck dead things.
Um, meat bun is definitely hard and extreme too, which is really hard to find. Um, after I finished after I finished all three of the MXTX novels, I was reaching a point where I'm like, okay, I need more. I need good content. And one of the artists I was following was posting pictures of the 3,000 steps. So I'm like, this looks like pain. What's this? And they
Oh,
gave me
what's
the
this?
title, and I'm like, oh, let me go read. It was nothing but pain. But yeah, but it was good. I was so good. There's another novel that I really love. That's nothing but pain, and maybe if I get around to it, I'll translate it. But it's so good. I love it when it hurts really hard. But oh,
It's also worth mentioning while we're on the topic of Rex that if you do have something that you would like Seven Seas to pick up and license, just because that is
yeah,
the
no,
publisher
the
that is the publisher topic right now. Like we can guarantee that they read those interest, like those Google forms.
yeah, the monthly
It's
survey is
the
more
monthly
effective
survey,
than you think.
yes.
Like I
It's
drop
midnight and
titles
I'm
on
blanking
them
out.
all the time.
But
I'm like, hey, how about you buy this one or this one or this one? And then they go on license
mhm.
or they pay attention more to the monthly survey
Yes,
than
the
they do
monthly
me.
if you do want something licensed, they absolutely do pay attention to the monthly surveys. So,
Yes,
and
but yeah.
similarly, if you want to pitch something to another publisher, check to see if they have monthly surveys because those don't get routed into a paper shredder. Like they put out those surveys for a reason.
Eh, but yeah. But otherwise, I have other recs. I have a lot of recs, but now my mind is going blank. But yeah, I think I saw a question of, someone asked when I would finish Turbulent World, and the answer is when I finish MDZS, I will go back to it. I do want to finish it. We're only 10 chapters away, not including the extras, but I really want people to read the extras. Oh, it's so good, even though the extras are literally one third the length of the novel itself. But yeah, I will get back to it. Definitely second half of this year. So please look forward to it. And we'll see about other fan projects after that. But I think there's so many good fan translators out there working on various good novels that I mean the
There
Danmei
yeah,
fandom's thriving. So
there are so many wonderful titles on JJ that are just completely
mm,
untouched by fan translators.
yep.
So, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean there's a lot of good gold nuggets. And it's not just
Mhm.
JJ is only one of the many sites that people write on, right? There's JJ, there's CP, there's
Yeah, I mean, yes, they do.
yeah,
Like JJ is probably
so
the hub for Danmei in
yeah,
particular, but at least for the moment. But
yeah. But yeah.
unless they keep
Um,
banning authors.
do you have other questions?
Yeah, I will scroll up through the chat to see if we missed any
Oh,
questions. But if you have
yes,
more
the
questions,
extras will be published. Yes, that's the question I was talking
if
about.
you're talking about extras for the MXTX
MXTX.
books, like yes,
Yes,
they are being published.
all of
Excuse
them are
me.
included. Yes.
And no, none of them are censored.
Mm,
You will read about that sword,
yeah.
and you will read about where it goes.
Mm. Get some wine to smooth up the process. But yes. Do you have other questions? Other questions?
um, there was also a question of how Seven Seas was able to get uncensored for those three, and we unfortunately didn't work with the licensing, so we wouldn't really be able to answer that question. Like we don't know the answer.
I mean, they're very adamant about getting the uncensored versions for their
Correct. They are
publication.
very clear when they contact the authors and their agents as to like, we are interested in the uncensored versions only.
Yeah, so which is excellent because we like all that blood and gore and porn, right? Adds all the flavors to life. For reals. I think that's it. That's it.
If only we got to read about Shalian doing a Rose Bride impression in TGSCF, but God fucking forbid we read about loving
Yeah.
devoted married sex in the missionary position for the purposes of breeding.
I mean, the breeding kink is very popular in Danmei.
Okay, we have 2 questions that came in. One is how long it took us to translate each book, and another is what is a pun or expression that we really wanted to include but was just impossible and didn't wind up doing it. Like like it was just way too difficult to explain in context, and a footnote would have ruined it, for example. As for how long it took us to translate, it really depends on the book. Like they are very variable in length. We discussed earlier that TGCF and MDZS each pose their own challenges because one, we're reviewing and editing a fan translation and comparing it against edits made by MXTX herself, versus the new translation for MDZS. But it really just, it varies.
I mean, the in-house editors also have other stuff on their plate too. So, and it really depends on what what everyone's times are looking like as well.
Yeah.
Because like we be working on both at the same time, and then sometimes one of them would be like, "Hey, can you get this to me in 3 days?"
It also depends on the printer's schedule.
Yeah.
Like sometimes they'll just be like, get us this next week, and they just,
Yeah.
And also we have to keep in mind the schedules of the other departments at Seven Seas, like the design department, like the layout department, stuff like that.
Yeah. But I do think that we've now settled into a schedule that works best for everyone. And yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think yeah. Well, I think the pun question is good, a good one to end on. Somebody also asked a very important question about who's the most breedable.
Is it wrong to say Shinchinsho?
He's got those skinny little hips. Not going to have a very easy time birthing his babies.
I suppose you are right.
I think Wangshan is the only couple who I would ever trust to be parents because they have proven success record.
I mean, I want to say Airplane Bro is the most breedable. He's very pliable.
But like Shalian,
He
literally
stalks.
has a kink for it. So I think there's an argument to be made.
Just because he said it, or he didn't even say it. It was implied.
Implied.
But
we're being told to get off the stage by the
what?
by
We're
the
getting to the
nods.
good part.
So.
Okay, I'm gonna say Airplane Bro is the most breedable because He just is a hamster.
And I'm going to say that you're trying to kill Airplane Bro because he is going to die if he has to carry that child.
Come now. Mo Beijing would be such a good husband to him. He pampered the boy. It'd be so good, right? Like, if anyone was to get preggo, it would have to be Airplane Bro because Mo Beijing is molded to be the best husband, right?
What if he eats the kids like hamsters do sometimes?
What?
Hamsters will
do
eat.
that?
Yeah.
Why? Under what circumstances? They
I
don't.
don't-
No, animals don't just eat their children for no reason.
Yes, they do.
There is always, I don't know, some survival reason that they eat their children. But otherwise, under perfectly comfortable nests, there's zero reason for them to eat their children.
If you have a hamster and it gets pregnant for some reason, like it is
You would love it.
lit-
You would cherish it. You would pamper
you
it.
are
You
you
give
are
it proper
literally
nest feed.
advised by pet care experts to remove the babies before the mother eats them.
Really?
Yes.
Wait, really? TIL.
Like that picture of Kronos
Well,
eating his children.
thankfully, Mo Beijing is not a hamster, and he would be the best father to his children once they are born. And before that, he would take excellent care of Airplane Bro. Yes. Oh my god. Okay.
So we're gonna cut this off right now before we get further into vor.
Oh, no.
And also because the mods are telling us to get off the stage.
No. We
Probably.
haven't had sexy time yet. Okay. We can do that on Twitter.
For the record,
Sorry.
you guys, I did pull a list of the sexy times with Wangzi and Tag, and I'm in the process of getting them into a readable format, and I will make a
And quote
YouTube.
unquote readable.
I will make a tenderly crafted YouTube video and donate all the profits to charity.
I'd be on that. Okay. All right.
Okay. Anyway,
Okay.
thank you for
Okay,
coming and listening
yeah.
to us. I know it's
Yeah.
late, but we really,
Yeah.
it means a lot that you came to visit
Yeah.
us and asked us questions.
Yes, thank
We
you
will
guys.
hopefully
Thank
see
you.
some of you at AX next week. I will be underneath
Booth babe.
I will be underneath Suika's booth, just vibing.
Hey. All right. But yeah, feel free to DM me. My DM is open if you have other questions. But other.
I'll make her do the rec list, don't worry. But bye now.
Yeah.